Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. A workplace investigation into firefighter Zach Muse's death in a utility vehicle crash last year has been blamed on a series of failures by the BC Wildfire Service, the second such report to emerge in as many days. We'll look at what needs to be done to keep wildfire fighters safe, and the new movie It Ends With Us is being accused of romanticizing abuse. But could its depiction be more realistic than most Hollywood productions? I'm Amy Bell, in for Michelle Elliott, and this is BC Today. Thanks for joining us on radio, TV, and live stream. And you can call us now on our top story. How should safety issues at the BC Wildfire Service be addressed? Our number is 604-669-3733. You can also call 1-800-825-5950 or just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And you can always email us bctoday@cbc.ca. On Wednesday, we brought you the findings of a WorkSafeBC report into the death of wildfire fighter Devin Gale, which found several safety issues in BC Wildfire Services that led up to her death. Today, another report highlights, yet again, the safety shortcomings surrounding the death of 25-year-old Zach Muse. Zach was killed when his utility terrain vehicle rolled over. He had been working to fight the McDougall Creek wildfire. Now, for more, we're joined by CBC reporter Yasmin Ranea. Hi, Yasmin.
Hello.
So, Yasmin, tell us more about Zach and what led to his death.
Yeah, Zach Muse was loved by many. Originally from Ontario, he came from a big family, 5 older siblings, and the report says that he was in a utility terrain vehicle, as you said, also known as a UTV,
Right.
which hauls equipment, and he was with his supervisor while they were going to get fuel. And so as they were driving on this gravel road, a pickup truck was coming towards them. And so to avoid it, the UTV drove off the road through a ditch to take a detour that led back to their work site. Now, this report from WorkSafeBC was obtained by CBC News through an access to information request, and it redacted the names of the driver and the passenger. So we don't know who was driving. But anyways, it says there was a 4-meter drop on that road.
Wow.
And so the driver tried to brake, but couldn't stop. And so the UTV rolled on the passenger side. The supervisor was injured. And of course, Muse was dead.
What are, I guess, some of the key findings of this latest WorkSafeBC report?
Yeah, the report found the BC Wildfire Service violated several sections of the occupational health and safety regulations. So, first thing is the fire service failed to ensure a pre-use inspection was completed on the UTV. And WorkSafeBC says if an inspection would have been completed, the BC Wildfire Service would have found safety gaps. And that includes that the UTV was equipped with door netting on each side, but it was actually damaged. And so this netting, it was intended to reduce the probability of a person's head or limbs or torso being trapped between the UTV and the terrain in case of a rollover. But there was a quick release clip on the passenger side, and it was damaged and ineffective. The report also found that the fire service's off-road vehicle training program did not actually include UTVs. And the manual from the UTV manufacturer outlined that people need to wear helmets while in those UTVs, and those helmets are approved by the U.S. Department of Transportation. And the BC Wildfire Service was given 3 of those helmets, but the report found that they were not used on the day of the incident. And finally, the report found that the fire service did not provide any written procedures or policies specifically about the operation of UTVs, even though they were required to do so.
Okay. And I mean, it sounds similar to with the case we were talking about yesterday, just a number, no one thing was responsible, but a number of systematic problems. BC Wildfire Service has once again been cited for numerous safety issues leading to a young wildfire fighter's death. Has there been a response from them yet to this latest report?
Yeah, so Minister of Forest Bruce Ralston, who is responsible for the BC Wildfire Service, he has yet to do an interview with CBC News,
Right.
even though the requests are out there. But his ministry says that training has been expanded to ensure supervisors and staff have training specifically on the operation of UTVs. And it also says inspections of those vehicles are being required now before they are used. Ralston said in a statement that the safety of crew members is the first priority.
Do we know if any other incidents are being investigated right now that are connected to BC Wildfire Services?
We're not aware of any besides these two deaths of, as you said, Devin Gale and now Zach Muse. But in general, WorkSafe says these reports are intended to ensure that employers know what led to the circumstances and for these incidents to never happen again in the future.
Yasmin, thanks so much for expanding on this for us today. Much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Yasmin Ranea, a CBC reporter with us here in Vancouver. And the newly released WorkSafeBC reports into the deaths of 25-year-old Zach Muse and 19-year-old Devin Gale obviously highlighted numerous safety issues that wildfire fighters face on the job. And that has renewed calls for change as the wildfire seasons grow longer and the wildfires themselves become more intense. So we're asking you, how should work safety issues at the BC Wildfire Service be addressed? Call us at 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. And you can always email BC Today at cbc.ca. Joining me now is Paul Finch, president of the BC General Employees Union, which represents more than 2,000 members of the BC Wildfire Service. Thank you so much for joining me, Paul.
Thanks for having me today.
You did issue a statement yesterday after the WorkSafeBC report on Devin Gale's death. What are your thoughts after hearing this second report?
Well, first and foremost, our thoughts are really with obviously the friends and family and colleagues of both of these individuals who like many, work very hard to keep our province safe, and we try and keep that top of mind. But what I'll say is that, these reports, highlight what is, in our belief, a systemic problem. That systemic issue is a failure of the ministry to acknowledge a recruitment and retention issue that has led to or underlines the much broader issues that have been identified in these reports. And in particular, in the Devin Gale report, two of the findings, one was in terms of inadequate training, and the other was inadequate managerial supervision to ensure that safety protocols are being followed.
Mm. And now, Zach Muse worked for a big contractor, Big Cat Wildfire. How can contractors themselves be better protected?
Well, ultimately, it's the BC Wildfire Service that's responsible. The employer is responsible for the safety at the site. They're ultimately in charge of that, and they're responsible for that under the regulations. So we really believe that as a whole, the responsibility falls on the Wildfire Service and the ministry, but that the underlying issues impacting the service in terms of recruitment and retention and those issues that feed into all these other issues are there as well. And I'll just say in particular, we sometimes are not at full strength in terms of crews. We know that also the junior and mid-level leadership roles inside those crews are unable to retain the experience necessary. So 55% of crew leaders this year are new, we believe, and that just goes to show this retention crisis that so far has gone unacknowledged by the ministry.
Now, David Greer, Executive Director of the BC Wildfire Service, has acknowledged the issues you raised around, retention and recruiting, and says they've made changes, including converting seasonal workers to full-time employees. What changes are working and what still needs to be addressed?
So those changes to convert employees to seasonal regular status was something that we won in a prior round of bargaining. That's why that occurred, and it's been a positive move, but it hasn't solved the entire issue. So the big problem we're seeing is there's a culture of burnout. People are incentivized to work overtime because of the low wages in this sector.
I see.
And we're not seeing that retention in those key, absolutely critical roles for people who are often incident commanders on fires, but in particular, like I mentioned, not just, but those wildfire crew leaders. And those are incredibly pivotal roles. Look, the WCB report into the Gale fatality highlights the issue here with a few of the members not receiving the training they should have, and that's something that happens when you're able to retain that experience inside the service.
And you've said that the BC Wildfire Service needs to change its culture of normalizing risk. But these are dangerous and unpredictable jobs by their nature. How can risk be managed in these situations?
Absolutely. Well, you bring up a good point here, because we're asking a lot of these people, and a lot of young people in particular, to go and take risks to keep our province safe. And I think we respect that. And what we owe to them is to make sure that they're given the proper tools and training and support to do that. And we think there's a critical element here, and that is being able to retain the body of experience there. So that's really what our core concern is. Obviously you're not going to be able to remove risk, but the key thing to mitigate that risk is being able to retain your seasoned professionals inside of the service, instead of having them go off to other careers and other positions, because they can't raise a family on these wages, or they can't raise a family or settle in their community on the kind of overtime schedules that that's being required of these roles right now.
Right.
And that's crew staffing levels, and in particular, that's being able to retain those key junior to mid-level leadership roles, like the crew leaders.
Paul, I'd like to bring in a few calls from our audience members now. We'll go to Dave in Invermere. Hi, Dave.
Hello.
How do you have experience with wildfires yourselves?
Yeah, I've fought fires in the past, and had crews working with me. Just in the old days, there wasn't the professional kind of forest fire fighting approach that they have now. Yeah. But this summer we had a fire on our own ranch, and I just wanted to say that we just were so impressed with the professionalism of the team that came up. It was an initial attack group, and the team leader was on it. And the observations that I had with their safety procedures were top notch. They followed all the appropriate procedures. They did a dangerous tree assessment. They were extremely thorough. Compared to the old days, it's changed significantly. And maybe this is partially the result of problems they've had even last year. But in my observation, every step of the way, they were extremely cautious and safe, and followed all the appropriate procedures as I understand them. And there was the crew boss was there, and there was a younger guy training in the assessment of dangerous trees, and he was very careful in explaining and working with that junior person in the development of that. And so I just say that, and I can't speak to any other fire, but just in that one observation, it was very positive, and in terms of safety, I don't think there's anything else they could have done in that regard. So I'm not sure about other situations, but that was our experience.
No, that was your experience, and I really thank you for sharing that, because, Paul, that is something that we do have to acknowledge, that there are incredible people working in these incredible, difficult environments, and they are doing their best and have made a lot of improvements to their safety protocols.
Well, I think this goes exactly to the point I just made, which is that we do have an incredible body of well-trained and educated professionals. We just don't have enough of them that are staying in these key positions. And so I think, would like to thank Dave for that observation. And obviously that's, our experience. We've got, one of the best wildfire services in the world. We've got an incredibly professional group of people. So that's not the problem. The problem is being able to retain a number of those people in these key roles so they don't leave the service.
Right. I'll take a call now from Roman in Port Alberni. Hi, Roman. Thanks for calling BC today.
Hi, thank you for taking my call and discussing this important topic. I'd like to start by segueing through the fact that we're dealing with an issue that is not going away, that is in fact worsening almost exponentially, by virtue of the fact that we're on a continued basis of higher dryness and a higher basis of less water being moved back in to replenish what remain.
Yeah.
Given that, I'd like to see that this sort of thing is dealt with on the level of calculating risk and cost analysis. Is there resource being applied to this across the board for the Wildfire Service and all the teams involved to have adequate training and adequate staffing so that such guards as watch guards for such as cedars and other so-called dead man's trees can be looked at and implemented in a way that protects the crew? And I like the previous caller's remarks that they're very thorough, they're very professional. And I think sometimes, though, they get exhausted. And no matter how professional you are, there's a very, very, very minute percentage of people that can maintain high degree of situational and professional awareness to conduct their duties at full levels on an ongoing, exhaustive basis. And I think if we're going to look at this, I'd like to start with what are the resources being applied to this through and through, because this is all our problem. This is all our resources. This is all on Crown land and other lands that are fee simple, that are treaty, whatever. And I think we need to come together to invest in all the possible resources we can so the teams have ample opportunity to get their tools, their training, their trades on the ground when they're needed.
Thank you for those important points, Roman. And yeah, it is very difficult to maintain, high functioning, very important decision making capabilities when you are exhausted repeatedly. I just want to bring in another call. This one from Sue in from Eric in Lytton. Hi, Eric. Eric, are you there?
Sue's here.
Oh, Sue.
Nowadays.
Am I talking to Eric or Lytton or Sue?
Eric.
Hi, Eric. What did you want to add to the conversation today?
I was just wondering about the safety protocols. Do they ever do drug tests once in a while?
I'm not sure of that answer. Paul, would you be at all aware if they do any drug testing?
I'm not aware of the substance use testing regime or policies, but to our knowledge, that hasn't been a concern.
Okay. Anything else that you'd like to ask, Eric?
Yeah. No, that's okay. I know it's really short. Thank you.
All right. No, thank you. We'll go now to Sue in Prince George. Hi, Sue.
Hello.
So what was on your mind concerning these wildfire fighters today?
Well, first of all, just, hearing the recent tragedy, my heart goes out to them as a mom
Absolutely.
of a firefighter who's worked in BC wildfire for 5 years. Those hit really close to home, and there's been far too many, over the last few years. So that always comes to my mind, I guess.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. That must be a huge worry, and as a mother, you must be very proud. But it's very difficult in those situations. So thank you for calling in, Paul. We are coming up against the clock, but I just wanted to get your final thoughts on the situation. What needs to be done going forward? As Roman pointed out, these wildfire situations likely will continue to get worse each summer.
Absolutely. Well, look, I think a great point was made by a caller, and also in the interview that preceded this segment, which was, fatigue and, stress are major factors here. Those are things that get solved when you don't incentivize too much overtime and there's proper compensation in place. But just bringing it back and remembering that these are people that are doing incredibly good work. They're incredibly good at what they do. And what we need to do as a province, understanding that fire seasons, this is the new normal now in terms of having harsh fire seasons almost every year, we need to give wildfire fighters here the support they deserve and need to operate as safely as they possibly can. And so we are really asking the public to support us and calling the ministry to acknowledge the recruitment and retention problem and to act on it.
Okay. Actually, we've got one final question I do want to sneak in is, what advice do we give to new workers that may not feel comfortable speaking out if they do see a safety concern?
Look, new workers are protected under the regulations and under the act, and you've got a shop steward, you've got an occupational health and safety rep on these crews. Reach out to them if they feel there's any barrier to doing that, but you are always there to avoid unsafe work, and look to those resources and also to the experienced members of those crews.
Wise words to pass along. It's never easy when you're new at a job, but yes, safety has to be absolutely first. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Paul Finch is the president of the BC General Employees Union. Sorry, it is 12:26, and this is BC Today. Now, 1 year ago today, the McDougall Creek wildfire was discovered. Tens of thousands of people were forced to evacuate West Kelowna, and the fire destroyed nearly 200 structures last summer. As that emergency unfolded, you called this program with your stories and your perspectives on how the situation should be managed. For many residents, the rebuild is continuing. Leanne Poulsen lost her home in the fire, and she says the past 12 months have been emotionally draining.
This year has been just emotional roller coaster for us, dealing with insurance claim and all the time fighting back and trying to prove what we had, and yeah, has been tough. And we still both of us working, and we have daughter. We need to give normality in life, so yeah, we still have challenges like our insurance company is dying to pay for our septic system. In our neighborhood, we all need a new septic system because building codes change, and they still denying that. And there are other things, like all process for us for some reason has been really challenging. It like we challenge for everything. They taking, like we think we agree at budget, then they taking something out, then we have 2 months again to prove that we had that. So it's very draining, like emotionally draining.
That's West Kelowna resident Leanne Poulsen, who lost her home in the McDougall Creek wildfire 1 year ago. She was speaking on CBC's The Early Edition this morning. And to watch that interview in full, head to our website, cbc.ca/BC. A new movie is drawing criticism for what some say is a romanticized depiction of intimate partner violence. It Ends With Us stars Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni and follows along as their characters meet cute, fall in love, and build a typical life, a typical Hollywood tale. But where it aims to differ is the way it addresses domestic abuse.
We all have an idea of what love can be.
I want to see you again.
Now you see me.
You know what I mean.
That special connection you feel. But 15 seconds, that's all it takes to completely change everything.
I'm so sorry.
That was the trailer for It Ends With Us. And in a few minutes, we will take a greater look at the prevalence of gender-based abuse and violence and talk about what supports are needed by its victims. Now, this is a difficult subject for many, and I do understand it will be upsetting for some. But if you wish to join this conversation, you can call us now at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell, or email bctoday@cbc.ca. And we are on Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on our website, cbc.ca/BC, YouTube at CBC Vancouver, and on the CBC News app. And now the CBC News with Tim Weeks is next.
Good afternoon. Another troubling report investigating the death of a wildfire fighter has been obtained by CBC News. 25-year-old Zach Muse died after his vehicle rolled over a steep drop on a gravel road. The report says the BC Wildfire Service failed to ensure the proper inspections of the vehicle were done and the door netting in the vehicle was damaged. Residents can return home now that an evacuation order brought about by the Chilcotin River landslide has been downgraded. The Cariboo Regional District issued an evacuation order last month for 34 parcels of land along the Chilcotin River over fears the slide could cause flooding or further slides. The district says the evacuation order has been downgraded to an alert. And rain and more seasonal temperatures have helped reduce wildfire activity across the province. There are now 394 wildfires, with 4 fires of note. There have been 7 new reported fire starts in the past day, with 29 fires declared out. Turning to the BC weather, for the North Coast, cloudy this afternoon with a high of 18. In the Peace, mainly cloudy with a chance of showers and a high of 20. In the central interior, a mixture of sun and cloud, the chance of showers with a high of 23. For the Boundary Kootenay regions, mostly sunny this afternoon with highs to 28. For the Okanagan and southern interior, a chance of showers in the afternoon, risk of thunder as well with highs to 31. And for Metro Vancouver, Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, mostly sunny this afternoon, highs of 23, but the humidity will make it feel like 28. Now back to Amy Bell and BC Today.
Thank you so much, Tim. And thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC TV, and live streaming on the CBC News app and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. And of course, we will be discussing the film It Ends With Us and its depiction of gender-based violence right after a short promo, but we'd love to have you join our conversation at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And there are a lot of top stories on the afternoon shows in your region and in Metro Vancouver. Here's what's coming up on the coast.
Hi, Amy Belpuri here, sitting in for Gloria Makarenko. On the coast this afternoon, we'll tell you about a recent residential tenancy branch ruling. It gave a landlord permission to increase the tenant's rent by almost 24%. It was all due to a significant increase in the landlord's variable mortgage rate. And we will go through the ruling and what it means. We'll talk to a lawyer about it. Also, musician Colin James will be here. He plays the peony this weekend. He was also recently named to the Order of BC, and he has a new album out as well. So Colin James this afternoon on the coast starts at 3 o'clock. Talk to you then.
Thank you very much, Belpuri. And you can hear On the Coast on CBC Radio 1 in Metro Vancouver and anywhere on the CBC Listen app. As we told you before the news, the new movie It Ends With Us, starring Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, is generating a lot of praise and backlash in equal measure. The story concerns a love and relationship between the two characters that delves into intimate partner abuse. But with the press tour and red carpet filled with gorgeous gowns and flowers, it has been criticized for billing an abusive relationship as a rom-com, but it has brought the spotlight onto a topic that is often hidden and swept aside, and that's intimate partner violence. So what supports are needed for victims of gender-based violence? And I know this is a difficult subject for many, and it will be upsetting for some. But if it's safe for you to do so, we welcome you to this conversation. Call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell, and you can email bctoday@cbc.ca. Now, joining us is Ninu Kang, Executive Director of Ending Violence Association of BC. Hi, Ninu. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Amy, for inviting me.
Right off the top, I want you to tell us more about the work the Ending Violence Association of BC does.
Ending Violence Association is an umbrella organization that supports over 350 programs across our province. These programs are funded by our provincial government to provide support, education, to those that are experiencing violence. Our association, we provide support to those organizations and workers,
Right.
and we provide training and resources, and of course work with them alongside to do advocacy in addressing the most current issues impacting gender-based violence.
Okay. You said, I asked you when we were in the commercial break that you did see the movie It Ends With Us, sort of doing your due diligence before you came on the show. I do appreciate it. What were your thoughts, heading into it and once you came out of it?
Well, I did appreciate the fact that the movie built all of the characters in a sort of a multi-dimensional way.
Okay.
I did appreciate that because in the past we have had film where it's very, you have someone that has caused the harm and they're terrible and we should hate them.
Right.
And then you have someone that's being harmed and they get portrayed as a victim and sort of this hopeless person.
Right.
So I did like the dimensions, the multi-dimensions of the characters. And so I think there are nuggets in that film that points to things that many, many women, and of course some men can relate to as well. So I'm looking forward to sort of where we lead this conversation.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think sort of one question I had, or a thought that I had is how beneficial is it to have this sort of this spotlight placed on intimate partner violence, then sort of place it in a Hollywood sort of frame. On the one hand, I think any sort of light that we can shed on such a dark subject matter is warranted, but it does risk the risk of sort of romanticizing that type of relationship, I suppose.
Right. I appreciate that big platforms like Hollywood would take this subject on.
Right.
I think that the issue of gender-based violence, intimate partner violence within that, and sexualized violence, I think it's not talked about. I think it's under the radar, and there's lots of discomfort about talking about it. And so I don't have a problem with that. I think one of the things that I've been a little bit discouraged about is that some of the social media and the conversations we're having is, who showed up and whether there's conflict between the actors.
It does seem to be overshadowing it a little bit.
Yeah, and that's not the conversation we should be having. I think these are actors, they're professional actors, they did their job. Now the conversation should be the content of the film.
Right, that's our job now. And also interesting, a lot of conversations surrounding, say, Blake Lively, the female lead, sort of using this as a launching pad for a new hair care line and asking people to come see it with florals. But again, it speaks to the I guess, multitudes that any situation can have, but it does sort of take away from that main focus a little bit.
It does, but I'll be honest, I care less about why people are talking about her. Okay. She's a professional athlete. She's a professional actress that gave a performance.
Yeah.
And I don't have any more expectations of an actor to actually show up. Just for a minute. I think what we need to pull back in is this film is about men, in my opinion. The focus that we need to be having is why is this type of violence so vast in our community, under the radar, and we all have so much discomfort on talking about it. And so I think what I like to focus on is Justin, Baldini, who is a male actor who is showing up in social media in those spaces and really talking about men's responsibility. So I can be a little annoyed that she's using her platform to kind of promote herself, but I want to push that to the back because really the conversation has to be that discomfort conversation that men are generally uncomfortable and aren't sort of invited into these spaces to talk about it, what it means to be a man and how to pull other men into this conversation.
That is a very, I think, incredibly important conversation to make because it is so often women that are discussing it and women that are bearing the brunt of education. And it is equally important to educate men, but have men advocate for victims of gender-based violence. And I know that Justin, as an actor and as a director, and he bought the rights to this film. He was the one that wanted to bring this message, and he is still really trying to push that and to get that message across. So it is good to see him using his platform for that. And I agree. Let's push the other stuff to the back burner.
Yeah.
Hair isn't that important. Yeah. I would love people to join this conversation. Whether you agree with the movie, whether you have unfortunately an experience with one of these situations, call us now at 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733. And if you're more comfortable sharing your story on email, you can email bctoday@cbc.ca, and we will not read out your name. Joining me today is Ninu Kang, and she joins us from I've just lost it.
Ending
the link
Violence
to the
Association
Ending
of
Violence
BC.
Association of BC.
No
My goodness, even I still have these brain pauses.
No worries.
Now, one thing about the movie, in terms of it being sort of both praised and criticized for many things, but it's the fact that they've sort of marketed it as a rom-com. A lot of people are upset with that. Is it possible that in any relationship where there has been violence, that there is that sort of dichotomy, that there can be these moments of love and perhaps fun and passion intertwined with these moments of violence? So in a sense, that's more of a realistic portrayal than you said, usually when it's just this terrible, bad person and the angelic victim.
I think that's what I appreciated about the movie, and that is you have a woman that is the daughter of the mayor and for all intents purposes had resources to be able to open her flower shop, and so you don't really get a sense that, she doesn't have access to resources. And then you have her mother who's a support to her when she ultimately, maybe I'm giving the movie away.
I think in fairness, the book's been out for a long time.
Okay, so people will know. But when she ultimately decides to leave, she has support, she has resources. And that's not the reality for many women.
Exactly.
And so I think from that perspective, you have to sort of see it in a very narrow context. This is an experience of one woman who had resources, one woman who's white, obviously middle class, you can tell, and that of course added with the fact that these are famous actors and are attractive and good looking. I mean, so I think you have to have a critical lens and look at that story within that context. But the wider, if you kind of, look at the wider lens, women often don't leave because they don't have the finances. Women often leave, and those that are, using violence against them will stalk them. They will use the children to, to keep the woman in the relationship. There will be threats and all of those things. And of course, those didn't get portrayed in the film. And so I think that's the purpose of these conversations, that we know that it is complex. You are in a love relationship. You chose this person. There are those good times in a relationship that hold you back. You have a hope that the person will change. Right. But I think the key message that sort of got delivered here is when someone does use violence against their intimate partner, or even in the movie, I think there was also the layer about sexualized violence within an intimate relationship as well, and that how complicated it is to leave that situation, and that those that use it, unless they're held accountable, unless there's some form of education and realization what they're doing, that generally what we find is those that use violence and kind of dig their heels in, and sometimes violence actually escalates when they're confronted. So that's a really, really important piece. I think many survivors out there who are listening to us today, they're saying this story is way too rosy. It's much more complicated than that. And the person that harmed me never apologized. Whereas in this movie, you see Justin apologizing to her and saying he's sorry. But many people don't even say sorry.
No, those are words that many people don't hear, because I think many perpetrators of violence don't even realize that what they're doing is abusive, whether it's physical or mental. It's just not something they realize. I do want to take a call now from Cheryl in Victoria. Hi, Cheryl. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi.
I understand you were a therapist for nearly 40 years.
I'm still a therapist now.
Oh,
and I
okay,
work
sorry.
Specifically with men.
Okay.
And I think it's important to open the conversation up as to how many men are sexually, physically, psychologically, and financially abused by people.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just gender, it's about power and control.
Very much so. And your help with people, do you find that it's more difficult perhaps for a male to admit that they're being abused in some way?
Totally. The statistics are way off. Most of the men that I've worked with have never reported it.
Mm.
And if they have, like there's a domestic violence situation, I know several men where they've called the police and they've been arrested when their female partner was beating on them. Doesn't make sense to me.
Mm. That's a good point to bring up, Cheryl, and I really appreciate that. One thing I do hear is that, when we talk about abuse, we typically think it's, physical, being smacked or held down, or as you meant, that sexualized element of abuse. But it's not always that obvious. Mm-hmm. What are some things that a person in a relationship might experience that they don't recognize is violence against them?
Yeah, and that's part of sort of the continuum of violence. And Cheryl, thank you for those comments. And I think Cheryl's point about the fact that in an intimate partner relationship, sort of the key element is coercive control.
Right.
And of course, that can sometime in a relationship of course, can come from women and men as well. One of the reasons we focus on men is predominantly when we see, homicide statistics, domestic violence homicide statistics, or we see those that are coming out predominantly are women. Statistically, research is showing predominantly, and why we focus on women. But to Cheryl's point, absolutely, the conversation needs to be there with men. Men need to feel more comfortable being able to come out. In a society, we need to create a space where men can talk about not just only their use of violence, but this movie touches on trauma that boys experience in their life just as much as girls do, and that they live with that trauma inside their bodies and impacts them for the rest of their life. But I think it is important to recognize that even in the movie, and predominantly, the violence experienced by boys at younger age and the early years of trauma, significant amount of that is by men. And that might be men who are abusing their mothers or their sisters and so on and so forth. So I agree with Cheryl. Men are also, vulnerable to this type of violence. But the main phenomena that I think men also need to talk about is why is it that men are still using disproportionate amount of violence compared to women?
And that was a question that I did have for you, is that it is so predominant still, and what is that root cause of it? And again, to be able to talk about it and to have that layer of discovery. We have another call now from Maureen. Hi, Maureen. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Hi. This hits home. My daughter was in an abusive relationship with a man who was 14 years her senior. And the police had been called several times to the house by neighbors, hearing her crying for help. And I begged her to move back home, get counseling. The RCMP offered her counseling, and he ended up killing her.
Oh, Maureen, I'm so sorry.
And that was in 2008. The police said, I said, could that be first-degree murder? And they said, no, that's hard to prove, but second-degree murder for sure. He got out, or it got downgraded to manslaughter because he had been drinking, which drives me nuts. He broke 39 bones in her face, chipped teeth, broken ribs, bleeding in the brain. And the police were wonderful, but their hands were somewhat tied because she refused to cooperate. And that drove me nuts. He had her under so much control, and then she would move back home and then go back to him. I can babysit his son it wasn't her son, but his son, and I can be his friend. I said, Melissa, walk away, get help. I said, I don't want you going back to school. I want you to get help, and there's help out there. And the police offered her help, but she would keep going back to him, and he eventually killed her.
I am so
I
sorry.
could write a book.
And Melissa was her name?
Yes.
What do you want people to know about Melissa's story?
Melissa was an honor roll student. She got scholarships. She had just under 4-point average. Her weak subject was math. She had a form of dyslexia, but she conquered it with the help of teachers. And she had everything going for her. She wanted to be a social worker and deal with street kids. And then she met this idiot, and she was working part-time at a neighborhood pub and going to school. And he came in, and he conned her into going out with him, and shortly after she moved in with him. And I begged, he was 14 years older than her, I begged her to leave him. And I said, I don't want you going back to school yet. I want you to get counseling. And I said, you can write, but just do it for your own enjoyment. And she would keep going back to him, and he eventually killed her.
Again, I am so sorry for your loss, Maureen.
My message out there is the police are not the enemy. You may not like what they tell you, but listen to them. They've got victim services, and walk away, and you cannot be their friend.
Maureen, we're so honored and here with you. And to hear about Melissa, she sounds like an incredible, amazing daughter and young woman. And I think that's what our conversation here is about today, that your daughter deserved to live. And we are so sorry that we all have lost Melissa in this world, because she had the potential to live her full life. She deserved the potential to live her full life. And
Thank you.
And you sound so strong, and it sounds like she'd be so proud of you, Maureen, that you are keeping her story, journey alive, and that we will continue to conquer this type of violence.
Oh, and my message is walk away. You cannot be their friend, and the police are not your enemy. They're there to help, and they do help.
Yeah.
They help me a lot, and just don't walk away and don't go back.
Yeah, what a powerful message, Maureen, that you are sending to women that might be in those situations where they're just, they think they like the guy, or they even maybe love the guy.
They think they can save him or
Yeah,
change him.
exactly. And you're so right, Maureen, that our own belief system, our own cultural value, our attraction to the person, our how we're socialized to find that person, and then really put everything in that relationship to make sure that it works. And it sounds like your beautiful daughter tried to do that, and she lost her life over that. So
And
we are so sorry.
It continues to break my heart.
I can only imagine, Maureen, and I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being able to share that that with us and for sharing Melissa's legacy in the work that you do. And of course, if anybody does need to access some support, you can contact Victim Link BC at 1-800-563-0808. We'll leave that up on the screen for you.
And I will also invite Maureen to connect with me after the show as well. If that's,
Wonderful.
that's
Maureen,
needed.
we can get you two connected so you can further that conversation. But hearing something like that really strikes home. You know, we talk about it in abstract sense or refer to a movie. This is an incredible, dynamic woman filled with potential whose life was cut short. And you have this frustrated mother continually begging and pleading with her not to go back and imploring her to access help, which she wouldn't. What can you do in that position when you see this happening so clearly and you're trying to get them back?
You know what? It's probably one of the hardest thing anybody can do. And often when you do try to intervene like Maureen did, you know, sometimes you fear losing that person because they don't want to talk to you because they're not hearing what they want to hear. But I think the point I want to make, and I think Maureen touched on this, is that gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, the severe form of it is homicide or suicide. And that is the seriousness of this issue. And the other thing is, to our previous caller, I think I also want to bring her point back in as well, is that when someone is experiencing domestic violence, when someone is causing harm in an intimate relationship or sexualized violence, it's not only affecting that person, the survivor, the victim in this case, it actually impacts everyone in society, impacts the family, which includes children, men, grandparents, sisters, brothers. And when something like this happens, even the men are feeling helpless. And sometimes, you know, we want to understand it as an issue of men and women, but I think that's why I started this conversation with you today, Amy, is that women are doing all that they can to try to end the violence that's happening to them. It's the men who we need to understand what's happening for young boys, what's happening for men, where they find themselves causing harm. They cause harm, and then they can't, you know, then they get into that defensive place. They feel like they need to double down and now not even go for help themselves to protect themselves. So I think that's the conversation.
Sorry to cut you off. Such a wonderful conversation, and thank you so much. Ninu Kang, Executive Director of Ending Violence of BC. And that is all we have time for today.